Chapter 176. After leaving the village, the road had already been paved with the help of some villagers. Therefore the speed was similar to normal. After making a circle they finally returned to the main road. After a few hours Liqingdi ordered them to speed up. Even the lunch was hastily prepared. Even the emperor could make do with it. Even if others wanted to complain they could only hide it in their hearts. No one would be stupid enough to complain at this time. Jingwan even thought that Liqingdi might have been scared by the situation along the way. That was why he was in such a hurry to reach the destination first. In this way, even if they were delayed, they were not much later than the original estimated time. Not to mention the others, even Jingwan breathed a sigh of relief. To be chosen as the site for the construction of the palace, it definitely had a unique advantage in many aspects. Not to mention other things, after entering the land she could clearly feel that the temperature had dropped a little. When she finally landed, Jingwan estimated that the temperature had dropped by at least 5 or 6 degrees. Although this number was not obvious, to be more specific, it was the difference between 37 or 38 degrees and 32 or 33 degrees. The latter would definitely make people feel much more comfortable. Sometimes one could only feel it when they personally experienced it. After getting off the carriage, Sun Yijia could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately we followed. This place is indeed much more comfortable than the capital. When her feet touched the ground, Jingwan took 2 deep breaths. Then she smiled at Sun Yijia. Sister-in-law, quickly go and rest. Don't talk about your sister-in-law. Quickly go and rest yourself. Madame Luo said in a bad mood. Jingwan held Madame Luo's arm and shook it coquettishly. I know, grandmother. Let third brother settle the matters. We all go and rest. Jingwan did not hold back at all and threw her bag to her brother. Luo Jingbo did not mind at all. Little sister is right. Grandmother, you all go and rest. It's not a big deal. I'll take care of it in a while. Originally he had already sent people over to tidy up the place. He only needed to casually make some arrangements for the housekeeper to be in charge of the allocation and the other servants to be in charge of the arrangement. Another advantage of making arrangements in advance was that everything was done properly. After entering the door he could take a comfortable bath and relax. Then he could sleep. It wouldn't take too long even if it was only an hour. After eating something he would be energized. However, the heavens were not on her side. Just as she was about to step through the door, she was told that Duchess Ding was here. Not to mention Jingwan, most of the people in the Luo family equated Duchess Ding with a troublemaker. After all, they were in-laws. Even if they did not like it, they still had to put on a show. Lord Luo went in, but Madame Luo turned back. Jingwan was a junior, and Sun Yijia and Luo Jingbo were her daughter and son-in-law. It was even more impossible for them to leave. Duke Ding's mansion was directly carried in a sedan chair. When she saw the person who came down from the sedan chair, Jingwan was shocked. Compared with the graceful and dignified Duchess Ding, she was now old and thin. She seemed to have aged more than 10 years. Even her back was a little stooped. She stood trembling slightly and needed someone to support her. She was just an ordinary old woman. If she didn't know her identity, she might not have recognized her when she suddenly saw her. She didn't know if she deliberately showed off something. She was wearing Duchess Ding's clothes, but she didn't know that she couldn't hold up the clothes. It looked a little empty, like a clown who stole other people's clothes. She sighed in her heart and couldn't help but feel less disgusted by her. Jingwan hadn't seen her since she broke off her marriage with Sun Yilin. She was sick, so it was not Jingwan's turn to visit her. Except for her brother and sister-in-law who went back to visit her a few times, only her mother went to visit her once. However, that time it was probably not a good thing because her mother didn't go for long and she didn't look well when she came back. When Sun Yijia asked, her mother just forced a smile and said, "It's nothing. Don't mind it, Sun Yijia. After all, she is your mother." Everyone knew that Madame Zhang must have been bullied, but it was better not to mention her character. After Sun Yijia married into the Luo family, she got to know her better. Jingwan also told her that she didn't need to treat her as a mother-in-law except for the proper respect. She still needed more people to protect her. However, the backyard of the Luo family should be peaceful now so she could live her own life. Sun Yijia told her directly, "Mother, you don't have to go in the future." Madame Zhang agreed with a hint of joy. Although Jingwan was already used to it, she was still speechless again. Fortunately, Sun Yijia didn't say anything to save her face. Otherwise, she might have offended others with her expression. Many people had the same mentality. Even if there was something wrong with their family, they wouldn't want others to agree with them even if they said it out loud. They should listen to the opposite and do a good job of saving face. Of course, if they did this to those who were really close to them, it would hurt their feelings. Sun Yijia didn't care. On the contrary, she actually liked people like Madame Zhang. Compared with those who had to beat around the bush, Madame Zhang was simply too cute. When Sister Wan got married in the future, there was no harm in her protecting her for the rest of her life. Along the way, Sun Yijia didn't go to see Duchess Ding, but Duchess Ding's temper was getting weirder and weirder. Especially when Sun Yilin was away from the capital for the first time on an errand. Before he left, Duchess Ding made a scene and refused to let him go, as if he would never come back after leaving the capital. However, Sun Yilin was not a good boy. Even if Sun Yilin used the name of being unfilial to bully him, he just sneered. He knew his elder brother's mentality too well. It was nothing more than that he couldn't sit in the position of the heir for a long time. The people who originally relied on him were more and more dissatisfied with him, and Sun Yilin was getting better and better. Now he even went out of the capital on an errand. Sun Yilin had been an official in the imperial court for many years, but unfortunately he just muddled along. His position was not small, but he had no real power. He could climb to his current position only by relying on the name of Duke Ding's mansion. Therefore he certainly wanted to stop Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin left very quickly, as if he didn't care that he was unfilial at all. Sun Yijia went to see her. 8 out of 10 sentences were about her son. When she wanted to talk about him, Sun Yijia ignored her and didn't interrupt. She fulfilled her duty and left. Now she had just settled down. Instead of resting well, she came to the courtyard of the Luo family's summer palace wearing Duchess Ding's dress. What did she want to do this time? Madame Luo was also surprised in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. What's the matter, in-law? She went straight to the point, but her tone was calm and not harsh. Duchess Ding acted as if she didn't see her and looked directly at Sun Yijia. Yijia, come back with me. Sun Yijia was very angry. What did her mother mean? Her in-law's grandmother was talking to her. She was an elder, but she ignored her like this. She didn't even care about the basic etiquette and rules. How could she offend her mother? She even asked her to go home with her mother. Everyone knew that a married daughter's in-law's home was her home. If she went back to her mother's home, she could only be a guest. She was fine on her own. Her mother's words made it sound as if the Luo family had wronged her. Mother, what nonsense are you talking about? I'm the daughter-in-law of the Luo family. The summer palace of the Luo family is here. Where do you want me to go with you? Yijia, don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll take care of everything for you. You don't have to be afraid of the Luo family. Sun Yijia's face darkened. What was she talking about? Mother, go back quickly. Don't make a scene here. Yijia, I know you've been wronged in the Luo family. They despise your disfigurement and are mean to you. They covet your dowry and won't let you go back to see me. They think I can't get up, so they bully and humiliate you. Don't be afraid. I'm here now. What can they do to you? At worst, we can divorce and go home. What's the harm in Ding General Manor taking care of you for the rest of your life? Yijia. Not to mention the master of the Luo family, even the servants' faces were livid. Sun Yijia was so angry that she cried. How could her mother say such things? Yes, she was born in a prestigious family and was the wife of Ding General Manor. How could she shamelessly fabricate such nonsense? The summer palace was built closely together. The neighbors were all high-ranking officials and nobles. At this moment they were either settling in or had just arrived. Many people were already craning their necks and pricking their ears to watch the show. If those who didn't know the situation heard these words, they would really think that the Luo family was such a family. Their reputation would be tarnished by her. Sister-in-law, don't cry. Don't be angry. Jingwan was worried about her health and the child in her belly. Yijia, don't cry. Don't be afraid. I'll support you. Enough. Sun Yijia roared hoarsely. What do you want? What do you want? Am I your daughter? Why are you treating me like this? I'm doing very well in the Luo family. I'm doing much better than before I got married. Divorce? Go back with you? Take care of me for the rest of my life? How much do you hate me so much that you can't bear to see me living well? She was so angry that she felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. The color on her face quickly faded. The masters and servants next to her were shocked. Outsiders didn't know, but they knew that she was pregnant. Originally, the Luo Rongping incident was over and they were looking for an opportunity to announce the good news. They didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Luo Jingbo hurriedly held her. Ija, are you okay? Don't scare me, Jingbo, my stomach hurts. Sun Ija grabbed him tightly. My child. Mama Gong didn't need to be told. She asked someone to pull Jingwan away and stepped forward to check Sun Ija's pulse. She knew from her expression that the situation was very bad. Third young master, you have to find a doctor quickly to protect the baby, otherwise. Doctor, where's the doctor? Which family has a doctor? Hurry up and take a look at my sister-in-law. Jingwan was very anxious. In the blink of an eye, because of Luo Rongping and because of little Madame Wang, the Luo family's doctor didn't accompany them. How could the onlookers not know what was going on? Obviously the baby was affected. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that Duchess Ding was looking for trouble. This was a good time to curry favor with the Luo family. Needless to say, the family with a doctor quickly called for one. However, Duchess Ding suddenly grabbed Sun Ija. Ija, you're pregnant. How come I don't know? Did the black-hearted Luo family forbid you to go home and report the news? Hurry up and go back with me. Otherwise, you and the baby will be harmed by them. She couldn't even stand steadily. She didn't know where she got the strength from, but she couldn't shake her off. The doctor stood aside and couldn't get involved. Let go of me and get out of here immediately. Luo Jingbo was very worried, but he met such a crazy woman. If it weren't for the fact that she was his mother-in-law, he would have already punched her with his clenched fist. His respect for her status had all turned into bubbles at this moment. He even wanted to kill her. The scene was so chaotic, and the servants brought by Duchess Ding were also very regretful. If they had known that things would turn out like this, they wouldn't have dared to bring her here. The people who served her closely were also very worried. If this went on, she would really lose her baby. At that time, the enmity between them would be huge. However, their madam's temper was really too strange now. The people who used to know her best couldn't help her. They were worried that something would happen to her, so they could only persuade her nicely to let go. However, she didn't listen to them at all. She kept shouting, Ija, go back with me. Sun Ija's hand had already been pinched by her. Luo Jingbo was no longer polite to her. He directly reached out and pried her hand away. His strength wasn't light at all. Son-in-law, be gentle. Get out of here. Get out of here. This cold and stern reprimand was accompanied by a stick. In the eyes of others, it was old Madame's son who was impolitely hitting with her cane. The surrounding servants were hit and turned their heads. When they saw that it was their old madame, they immediately shrank their necks and retreated to the side. Duchess Ding's hand happened to be pried open by Luo Jingbo. In fact, it was also thanks to Nanny Gong. She clasped the acupoint on the inner side of Duchess Ding's arm, making Duchess Ding loosen her grip uncontrollably. Nanny Gong then let go at the right time. Old Madame's son grabbed her hand that was about to scratch Luo Jingbo, threw it away and slapped her. Duchess Ding, who couldn't even stand steadily, was naturally knocked to the ground. She didn't know whether she was stunned by the slap or for other reasons. In short, she looked at old Madame's son in a daze. There was a moment of silence. However, old Madame's son didn't even look at her. Where's the doctor? Hurry up and take a look at my granddaughter. The doctor on the side hurried forward. After taking her pulse, his heart skipped a beat. It would depend on luck to carry this baby. Hurry up, carry her into the room. Hurry up and lie down. Luo Jingbo waved away the servant girls and older female servants who came up to help. He directly carried Sun Ijia in his arms and almost trotted to the door. The servants and the doctor hurriedly followed him. Jingwan originally wanted to follow them in, but she couldn't help. On second thought, she immediately asked the servants to take out all the medicine they had prepared in case of an accident. There were some common medicines that could be used to protect the fetus. However, the prescription of a set of herbs might be different for each doctor. Therefore, Jingwan was not at ease. What if they didn't have all the herbs they had? What if they didn't have any with the other families? If they happened to need it, they would be in a hurry to find the medicine and waste time. Thinking about this, she immediately walked to Madame Luo's side and told her her thoughts. Hearing this, old Madame Luo immediately ordered people to do it. This matter actually happened very quickly. The process didn't take long. Luo Peishan sat down and took a sip of tea. When he heard that something had happened outside, he hurriedly came out. When he saw Luo Jing was back, he frowned and walked out of the door. When he heard old Madame Luo's words, he said, "When you go to ask for the medicine, tell each family that as long as they share the medicine, regardless of the amount, this old man owes them a favor." A favor from the Minister of the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs was really coveted. Old Madame Sun looked at the Luo family's actions and then looked at her own. She was still her biological mother. How could the difference be so big? Send your wife back. In the future, without my permission, she is not allowed to take half a step out of the courtyard. And all of you, you know that she is sick, but you still let her do whatever she wants. When you go back, each of you will be flogged 10 times. Old Madame Sun had been in charge of this mess for most of her life and really didn't want to care about it anymore. She originally thought that she could make trouble at home, but who knew that in the blink of an eye she would cause such a mess? If she hadn't asked one more question and inexplicably put on her clothes when she was about to reach the summer palace, she was worried that she would cause trouble and rushed over to take a look. It didn't matter if she died, but she was afraid that her death would affect the reputation of the Luo family, Yi Jia and her husband. No matter what the reason was, as long as something happened to her, the Luo family would be in trouble. As old Madame Sun's mother-in-law, it didn't matter how she punished her. Even if she died, it didn't matter if she was accused of forcing her daughter-in-law to commit suicide. Anyway, she was already a person who was buried up to her neck. After dealing with Duke Ding's wife, old Madame Sun walked to the Luo family and said, "In-law, it's my fault. I should have detained her long ago. My daughter-in-law is hysterical. She thinks whatever she thinks all day long and can't listen to others. Don't take what she said to heart. As for Yi Jia, we all hope that she and the child will be well. Our family is sorry to your family." Old Madame Sun couldn't go on. None of the Luo family's great-grandchildren had been born yet. The baby in Yi Jia's belly was only the second one, so the Luo family naturally valued it. If the baby died, it would not only be the culprit's fault, but also the entire Duke Ding's mansion's fault. Speaking of which, old Madame Luo married before her, but her eldest son was much younger than her. Therefore she had several great-grandchildren, but her eldest one hadn't been born yet. She didn't know whether it was because she didn't have a child in the early years or because she had difficulty conceiving. Even though old Madame Sun spoke kindly, old Madame Luo's expression was still not very good. "In-law, you don't have to say anything. Let's see if Yi Jia's child can be saved. If the child can be saved, I'll take care of it. Unless her mother dies, I won't let her go back. This happens to be what she wants. Our Luo family won't bear the reputation in vain." Old Madame Sun nodded. She has a bunch of people to serve her, so she doesn't need Yi Jia to do anything. Taking care of the baby is the most important thing. Even if you allow her to go back, I won't allow it. I only have one granddaughter, Yi Jia, and I'm also waiting to hold my great-grandson. I'll go back first. In-law, why don't you come in and have a seat? Oh, I just arrived. I have something to do anyway. Besides, Yi Jia is here, so I won't add to the trouble. I just want to trouble you to tell me about Yi Jia's situation later. I'll come to see her then. As for the rest, just let her take care of herself and don't think too much. Don't make life difficult for herself and her child because of her mother. If that's the case, then she should completely give up. Although the last sentence was vague, everyone understood what she meant. It was nothing more than telling son Yi Jia not to count on her mother anymore. If she didn't care about her mother at all and didn't take her seriously, then she wouldn't be sad. "All right, I won't send you off, in-law." Old Madame Sun nodded. As she turned around, she glanced at Jingwan and said, "It's our brother Lin's bad luck, but it's only right that he's blessed to have such a mother. Fortunately, Yi Jia married into your family. I'm content that one of the siblings is blessed. I don't have any regrets in my life." She then turned around and left. Speaking of which, old Madame Sun had a lot of children and grandchildren. Moreover, she had 4 generations living under the same roof. However, in Jingwan's eyes, her back looked a little bleak. She heard that recently she often stayed in the Ding General Manor and didn't go out. She was in a state of old age and loneliness. Obviously, a person like her should be spending time with her grandchildren and enjoying the happiness of a family. The doctor first stabilized son Yi Jia's fetus with silver needles and then hurriedly prescribed medicine. It turned out that Jingwan's idea was prescient. The Luo family's medicine was indeed missing one. The servant hurriedly brought it back. After the doctor confirmed it, it was immediately taken away to be boiled. Even so, Jingwan was still cautious and asked Nanny Gong to confirm it again. It was not that she thought that the family who distributed the medicine would do something, but there were too many secrets in the backyard. Jingwan was afraid that the family who distributed the medicine would do something wrong without her knowing. What if it was used on her family by accident? Jingwan had to be careful at this time and couldn't be careless. In this aspect, Nanny Gong was naturally very good at it. Sun Yijia's fetus was saved for the time being. However, according to the doctor, it was only temporary. Before the fetus was completely stabilized, if she was a little emotional, she would have a miscarriage. Moreover, it was the kind that could not be saved. She had to be more careful in the future. After all, a lot of blood was seen this time. After sending the doctor away, Sun Yijia was comforted by the Luo family in turn. In addition to her grandmother's words, she thought about her almost lost child and forced herself to stabilize her emotions. Gradually she really calmed down. In fact, without her grandmother's words, she had completely given up on her mother. She no longer thought about why her mother became like this today. After all, it couldn't be because of her. In her mother's eyes, she was not that important. At this time, old Madam's son had already learned the whole story from the servants. Every word that Duchess Ding said made her feel a little itchy in the palm of her hand. After all, the slap just now was too light. Listen to what she said. She was actually talking about her own attitude towards her daughter-in-law, wasn't she? Duchess Ding had been married to Duke Ding's mansion for decades. Old Madam's son might be strict and might have held the power of the inner residence for a long time, but she had never been mean to Duchess Ding, let alone hit her. This time she was slapped in public in the middle and late years of her life. It could be said that she lost face and couldn't protect her chastity in her later years. There were quite a few people from Duke Ding's mansion who came out this time. There were not many things in the mansion, but there were many idle people. They didn't work, but they had a lot of problems. They couldn't bear the heat or the cold. A thread on their clothes could rub their skin. If the material of the food was slightly inferior, it could defeat their appetite. Sometimes old Madam's son couldn't help but sneer. If it were up to her, she would tie them all up and starve them for 8 to 10 days. They could even eat tree roots. If they were stripped of their clothes in the middle of winter, not to mention clothes with threads, even withered grass could be wrapped around their bodies. However, old Madam's son was too lazy to pay attention to them. They were all drunk and couldn't see the decline of Ding General Manor itself. They couldn't see the emperor's dissatisfaction with Ding General Manor. They only saw that there was an empress standing there. They only saw that Prince Kong was the eldest son of the emperor and the legitimate heir to the throne. How ridiculous it was. Just wait and see. There would be a day when they would live on the streets. Of course, this was actually a good thing. When the new emperor ascended the throne, exterminating the whole family and exiling them 3,000 miles away was a joke. If she lived longer, she might be able to live until then. If she lived shorter, she would probably have nothing to do with it. If she lived longer, she would live longer. At this moment, a large number of people were here to laugh at her. They would take the opportunity to seize power and gain some benefits. Otherwise, they would hit her when she was down. Old Madam's son didn't frown. She just looked at Duke Ding, her eldest son. Her eyes didn't seem to be looking at her son. She said coldly, "You personally send some medicinal materials to the Luo family. I hope you won't be as stupid as your wife." If old Madam's son really put on airs, not to mention the people of Duke Ding's mansion, even the most senior elders of the entire Sun family had to respect her. The others would be terrified and shrink their heads like quails. Therefore, even Duke Ding had to respectfully respond at this moment. For some reason, Sun Yibin went to the Luo family with Duke Ding. It was Luo Peishan who received them. Luo Jinghua had to accompany his wife at this moment and didn't have time to pay attention to them. Seeing a pile of things sent over, Luo Peishan laughed. However, his words were full of sarcasm. He scolded people without using any dirty words, which made the father and son blush and smoke coming out of their 7 orifices. However, they couldn't find any words to refute. If you refuted 1 sentence, he could return 10 sentences to you. Moreover, he was in no hurry and was very gentlemanly. If you ignored the content of his words, it would even make people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. It was not that Duke Ding hadn't seen Luo Peishan's power in the imperial court, but at that time he wasn't targeted at himself, so he didn't have such a deep understanding. Sometimes he listened with relish. Now, in the future, he would no longer laugh at those who weren't scolded by Luo Peishan until they were speechless. He no longer felt that they were incompetent. No matter how angry he was in his heart, he could only endure it. He couldn't lose his temper. Otherwise he would definitely be kicked out of the house. At that time he would really make a mortal enemy. In the end he couldn't bear it anymore and asked to leave. However, because he thought of his mother at home, he asked about Sun Yijia's situation. However, the saddest one was probably Sun Yibin. He came with a purpose, but in the end, except for the initial greeting, he didn't say a word. When he came out, his whole face was wooden. It was not his fault. He was not qualified to enter the imperial court and had not seen Luo Peishan's power at all. He went back to report to old Madame Sunday. Old Madame Sun didn't say anything. She glanced at Sun Yibin with a gloomy and angry look. More importantly, he unconsciously drooped his head because of the blow. Old Madame Sun didn't comment. This grandson of hers had a bad heart since he was a child. He didn't walk the right path but walked the crooked path. If he could straighten out his mentality, he wouldn't be like this. Mother Yijia is pregnant. It's a happy event. Should I send something else? You don't have to worry about that. Do what you need to do. Duke Ding choked and twitched the corners of his mouth. Yes, then I'll take my leave first. As the mainstay of the Empress and Prince Kang's faction, when the Empress and Prince Kang were not around, he should be more active. He must not let the hearts of the people in their faction scatter. He must firmly tie them down. Sun Yibin naturally had to run actively in order to stabilize his position. Because he couldn't even get the position of heir of the Duke, if he wanted others to support him, he naturally had to be more courteous to the wise and spend more money. Of course, it was getting late and they were tired along the way. Everything could only wait until tomorrow. Old Madame Sun, on the other hand, went to see her daughter-in-law, Duchess Ding, after dinner. Everyone around her had been beaten, but because she couldn't leave people around her, they could only serve her with injuries. At this moment when they saw old Madame Sun, they were like mice seeing a cat. All of you get out. I have something to say to your madam. One by one they hurriedly squatted down and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Duchess Ding leaned against the big pillow. Her eyes flashed as if she was considering whether to get up and salute. Old Madame Sun didn't care about it at all. She sat down next to her and said, I know. You always carry the things at the bottom of the box with you. Take them out and give them to Yijia. Consider it your compensation to her. Duchess Ding's lips squirmed, but she didn't say anything. Old Madame Sun was calm and composed. In terms of spirit and appearance, she was even younger than her daughter-in-law now. If you don't take them out, I'll have someone send you back to the capital tomorrow. Of course, I'll also bring the divorce letter I wrote to you. Then I'll tell the world about your great achievements. Duchess Ding's pupils shrank. Mother, you actually want to divorce me? Chapter 177. Mother, I don't know what you're talking about. Duchess Ding lowered her gaze. Old Madame Sun was not angry that her words did not work. Since she had come today, she was sure that she would not return empty-handed. The relationship between her and her daughter-in-law was a real mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They had never crossed the line for decades. They were as close as mother and daughter. They had never even pretended to be close. Old Madame Sun seemed to be interested at this moment. Do you think that it was third Miss Luo who drove a wedge between you and your son? Is she the one who caused you to become like this today? Then what about your daughter? Not only did she not stand on your side, but she also became close to your enemy. She is an ingrate. In that case, why do you care about her? The moment you learned that she was pregnant, you were not happy because you were about to have a grandson. Instead, you felt that it was better not to have any vile spawn with the bloodline of the Luo family. Duchess Ding remained silent at the beginning, but later she shook her head and denied it. Old Madame Sun sighed helplessly. You really think so? And you are so deeply involved that you can't extricate yourself. I've seen people who are stubborn, but I've never seen someone like you who refuses to turn back. You worked so hard to raise Brother Lin and put all your hopes on him. He suddenly cared about another woman more than you. You felt sad and couldn't accept it. This is actually quite normal. Many mothers have such a mentality, but you can't wait to tie him to your belt. Is this the way you care about your son? Oh, when did you hit your head? Have you become stupid? When he really got married, would he treat his wife as a decoration? Would she have no use other than giving birth to children? Would she immediately turn back and snuggle in his arms to drink milk after he and his wife were done with the rites of Zhougong? In that case, why do you have to find a wife for him? You can just take him with you for the rest of your life. When you die, take him with you. You can even ask to be buried in the same coffin. He has been in your belly from the beginning and will be by your side until he dies. Look, how good is that? Except for you, no one else can be so close to him. Old Madame Sun was not in a hurry. She even deliberately lowered her voice towards the end. Duchess Ding's face turned green and white. She widened her eyes in disbelief. These words almost directly said that the mother and son had lost their morals. Mother, he is your grandson. How can you say that about him? Her voice was sharp, and her expression was as if she wanted to strangle this old witch who had slandered her son. Old Madame Sun calmly adjusted her sleeves. Did I say anything about Brother Lin? I'm just saying what you think. I'm talking about you. Brother Lin has always been a good child. He's smart, outstanding, and clean. He's also a normal child. When he reaches the right age and meets the right person, he'll also fall in love with her. It's just a pity that the child has a mother who's mentally ill. We didn't realize it in the past. Hence he lost his wife and his happiness. Now he only wants to escape from the home that made him feel warm. Perhaps dying outside is better than living in a home that only makes him feel pain. Nonsense. Nonsense. It's not like that. It's not like that. Duchess Ding shouted crazily. She did keep a close eye on Yilin, but she didn't want him to be seduced by a vixen. It didn't matter who he liked as long as he didn't care so much. As long as it didn't have to be one person, he could have as many women as he wanted. She just didn't want him to be addicted to love and ruin his future. What was wrong with that? How could he make her sound so filthy and despicable? What do you think will happen if outsiders know that Brother Lin has such a mother? All the results are in fact only one thing, that is, his whole life will be ruined. Except for those ugly women with many flaws, who will be willing to marry him. Were you very happy at that time? After all, he was abandoned by everyone and you became his only one. Old Madame Sun was still indifferent. She said the most unacceptable words for her daughter-in-law. Nonsense. Shut up, shut up. What right do you have to tell me to shut up? You dared to do it, but I can't talk about it? You're too ridiculous. A straight foot is not afraid of a crooked shadow. I didn't do it. Old Madame Sun smiled. A straight foot is not afraid of a crooked shadow? Unfortunately, if I say there is, then there is. Because she was thin, Duchess Ding's widened eyes became more frightening. Yilin is your grandson. How could you do this? How could you be so vicious and want to ruin him? Yilin has a bright future. How dare you, how dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? When I was young, I did a lot of evil things. I took at least 8 if not 10 lives. It's a pity that you didn't have the chance to see it. However, no matter how vicious I am, I can't be compared to you. It's said that even a vicious tiger doesn't eat its cubs. You even hurt your own flesh again and again. You're worse than a beast, aren't you? Just because of resentment against an outsider, you can vent your anger on your own daughter and even harm your own grandson. Now I'm actually wondering whether you really care about Yilin, or are you using him as a pretext to make a fuss? Otherwise, since it's all in the past, you should mend your relationship with your son. But look, what are you doing all day? His relationship with Ija has always been close. If he were to find out that you, his mother, almost harmed his sister and his nephew, would he break off all ties with you? Ija probably doesn't have any feelings for you now, but it probably doesn't matter to you. Everything you've done for her was based on her value and to pave the way for your son. So if she's gone, she's probably gone as well. Before Ija got married, I felt that the little talent for mother-daughter relationship existed in you. You should have really planned for her. But it turns out that I still underestimated how fickle you are. Sometimes I really don't know what people like you are thinking. Is your brain different from that of ordinary people? Take mending the relationship as an example. It's said that you should do something pleasing. What you did was as if others didn't hate you enough and you didn't push your own people far enough. Could it be that this is your way of redeeming yourself? You're really maverick. Or can I put it another way, you're so stupid that no one can compare? Duchess Ding stared at old Madame Sunday. She had been married for decades, but this mother-in-law had never said so much to her. But every word was like a gem, piercing her heart and lungs. Suddenly she pounced forward and reached out to strangle her. Madame Sun-La got up and stepped back unhurriedly. Duchess Ding fell to the ground at once and struggled awkwardly. The people outside heard the noise and communicated in their hearts. Finally, they couldn't help but come in. When they saw the scene, they were stunned for a moment and didn't know what to do. Old Madam's son turned around and said, "Come in and help your madam up." Hearing this, they didn't dare to be negligent and quickly came in. However, they subconsciously avoided Old Madam's son carefully. They only felt that this old madam was really too terrifying. The madam who had exhausted all of them was like a clown baring her fangs and brandishing her claws in front of the old madam, but the old madam didn't even frown. After they settled her down, Old Madam's son immediately told them to get out. Duchess Ding wanted to reach out and hold them, but the one who was within reach was directly pushed away. After being stunned for a moment, she began to make a scene again. Old Madam's son poured a cup of warm tea from the table and only took a sip. Then she walked to the side of the couch and poured it all over her head. "I've only done this kind of thing a few years after I got married. I haven't done it for decades. Now that I'm rewarding you, you should feel honored." The tea dripped down. Not only did it wet her hair, but it also smeared her face with water. She couldn't even open her eyes. Old Madam's son put the cup back and turned back. "Have you calmed down?" Duchess Ding wiped the water droplets on her face and remained silent. Old Madam's son asked again. "Calm down, mother." "I've calmed down." Duchess Ding felt an inexplicable chill. She trembled and hurriedly spoke. "It's good that you've calmed down. I tried to talk to you nicely, but you didn't listen and forced me to use tricks. Perhaps I was too kind to you in the past and didn't teach you well. That's why you've become like this today." What she said before was called talking nicely. Then what are you like when you don't talk nicely? The corners of Duchess Ding's mouth twitched. After marrying into Duke Ding's mansion for decades, today was the first time she saw this side of her mother-in-law. Now that she thought back to what she had just said, she was really out of her mind. It was no different from courting death. She drooped her head and shrunk her shoulders. "However, no matter what kind of character you have today, I'm too lazy to talk to you anymore. Where's the thing?" "There's a sandwich under the sandalwood makeup box on the dressing table." Duchess Ding's lips trembled. Old Madam's son walked over, picked up the makeup box, turned it over and knocked on it. There was no hollow sound, but it was different from other places. She moved it to the candlelight and looked at it carefully. Then she found a way to open it. It turned out that it was tightly stuffed with cork. No matter how it was shaken, it wouldn't make a sound. Old Madam's son took out the brocade bag, just rubbed it through the cloth with her hand and then put it in her sleeve. The makeup box was restored and then she left without saying a word. During the whole process, Duchess Ding just stared blankly. However, she could only stare and couldn't say a word. She had a hunch that if she really dared to refuse, she would really be kicked out of the house. Yilin would really be dragged into hell by her. Her maiden family would also be ashamed of her. Everything would fall apart. It turned out that her mother-in-law, who she thought was kind, could even abandon the reputation of Duke Ding's mansion and her favorite grandson when she became ruthless. As for whether her mother-in-law would give the thing to Yi Jiao or not, she was not qualified to ask. She was not qualified to ask either her mother-in-law or Yi Jiao. Old Madam's son, who was about to reach the door, suddenly turned back. She stood 3 steps away from Duchess Ding and looked down at her condescendingly. Her face was no longer kind but really cold. "In the mud pile of Duke Ding's mansion, you can sit steadily for decades. It shows that you're not stupid. It only shows that Yilin and Yi Jiao are actually the same. When they don't touch you, they can dote on you and they can care about you very much. When they go against your will, they can also give them up. Don't use it for his own good as an excuse. Don't flaunt yourself as a great and selfless person. You should know that your nature is exactly the opposite. However, no matter how much I say, it's all nonsense. Yilin has probably told you a lot. At that time you may reflect on it. Later you will only remember that you were disobedient and unreasonable to the extreme. If it's useless to talk, then do it. If you behave, I'll let you live out your life in Duke Ding's mansion. If you don't, I'll let you die in a mass grave and feed you to wild dogs. It's not a big deal to find a corpse to be buried in the ancestral grave of the Sun family instead of you. This is your last chance. Think carefully. Otherwise, even if I die first, I'll kill you before I die. Don't think about it. Pretend to be obedient now and stir up trouble after I die. You can rest assured that no matter what happens, I'll make arrangements for you properly." She didn't care about the mess of Duke Ding's mansion, and it didn't matter if it was completely destroyed. However, she couldn't bear to leave Yilin and Yi Jiao alone. Duchess Ding watched her back disappear at the door. It was already dark outside and she couldn't see anything clearly. She shuddered violently and couldn't help but collapse. After death, people paid attention to returning to their roots, being buried in the ground for peace and enjoying the incense of their descendants. This mother-in-law would rather find a random person to cut off all her paths. In terms of means, who could compete with her? Duchess Ding thought that she had run Duke Ding's mansion for many years. Although she didn't have an airtight control, at least she still had most of the power in her hands. However, looking at the attitude of the people who served her and were regarded as her confidants in front of the old madam, she knew that what she thought was just a joke. You can only be in power when he doesn't take power seriously. When she takes power seriously, you can stay away from her. Before the current emperor ascended the throne, there was also a bloody battle. Her father-in-law was much more powerful than her husband, the current Duke Ding. In the end, Duke Ding's mansion was still controlled by her mother-in-law. Did she think that she was really kind just because she had seen her kind face for too long? Did she think that she wasn't good at scheming just because she didn't make trouble for her? Her body went limp and she stared blankly at the void. Was she really that kind of person? But it turns out that you care about yourself the most. You don't allow others to ignore you, you don't allow others to disobey you. Once you cross your bottom line, you'll go crazy and lose your rationality. You don't care about the consequences and only think about yourself. Sun Yilin's words echoed in her ears again and again. She used to treat them as wind and forget them as soon as she turned her head. But now they seemed to be engraved in her heart. She tried hard to deny it and told herself that she really only cared about Sun Yilin. However, the truth was that if she really cared about him, she should help him marry the girl he liked, let him wear a happy smile, and let him give birth to a big fat grandson for her as soon as possible. She would hold her grandson while the husband and wife would watch with a smile from the side. Imagining such a scene, tears slipped from the corners of her eyes uncontrollably and disappeared into her hair. And Ijia, she was supposed to be able to hold her grandson in a few months. Because the place was small, each courtyard must be limited. Duke Ding's wife was ill, so she was not arranged to live in the same courtyard as Duke Ding. Moreover, Duke Ding was particularly disgusted when he saw her now. At the gate of the courtyard, old Madam's son saw Sun Yibin, and the maid carefully held the lamp. Sun Yibin hurriedly bowed. "Grandmother, did you come out from mother's place? I'm going to see mother." As he spoke, he frowned and hesitated for a moment. "Grandmother, how is mother?" Old Madam's son twitched the corner of her mouth, and the sarcasm was very obvious. Sun Yibin hurriedly corrected himself. "You are an elder to mother. It's right for you to say a few words to her. I don't mean anything else. Put away your hypocritical face as a filial son and virtuous grandson. Do you think I don't know that you hate your mother for favoring your younger brother? When they were not on good terms, you fanned the flames and made your mother's illness worse. Then you turned your head and gloated while blaming your younger brother, saying that he was unfilial. In your eyes, I'm also an old woman who flaunts her seniority." She glanced at the scar on his forehead. "At that time, my face was smeared with blood. How could you be so magnanimous to not care about it? You've long wanted to cut me into pieces, haven't you? Get lost as far as you can. Don't be an eyesore in front of this old woman." Sun Yibin's face was also green and white. It was very interesting, but at the same time he was a little confused. Grandmother's temperament was actually relatively cold. It was really the first time she spoke so rudely, and her attitude could even be said to be fiery. Was this really the grandmother he knew? It was as if she was a completely different person. "Grandmother, I was wrong at that time. Did I ask you to speak?" Sun Yibin was fiercely choked as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he could neither spit it out nor swallow it. In fact, those who knew old Madam's son when she was young would know that she was really not a good-tempered person. She was just good at cultivating her chi, and there were few things that could make her emotional. She knew what the outcome of Duke Ding's mansion would be, so she was too lazy to care. When she was really unhappy, she could beat you to death with a stick. It should be known that when Lu Qingdi was young, he was pressed to the ground and beaten by her. Old Madam's son didn't look at him again. "Since you're sick, you should rest well and lock the door of the courtyard." He completely banned Duchess Ding's feet, and also isolated the disgusting flies outside. Then Sun Yibin looked at the closed courtyard door. It was normal to lock it at night, but could the door still be open during the day? Then he looked at old Madam's son's back as she walked away. It was a little blurry with only a lamp, but her straight back was firmly moving forward step by step. Was his grandmother going to take power again? Because after Duchess Ding's wife fell ill, the power in Ding General Manor had been dispersed. Everyone, including his wife, had tasted the bad sweetness. If his wife benefited, he would naturally benefit. Logically speaking, he was the eldest son of the first wife. Since his mother was ill, the power should be handed over to his wife. In fact, it was already sullen enough that his power had been divided. Now he had to take it all back? Naturally, no one was willing to do that, but who dared to disobey their grandmother's words? He had to think of a way to see if there was any room for negotiation. Sun Yibin rubbed his eyebrows hard. There were so many things happening outside and there was no peace at home. He was really an old woman. He turned around decisively and left. His mother. The next day, old Madame Sun's descendants who came to greet her were all stopped outside the door. She seemed to be living the same life as when she was in Duke Ding's mansion in the capital. They didn't know whether to feel relieved or worried that the old madam had other tricks waiting for them. No matter what they thought, old Madame Sun took the things she had prepared and was ready to see her granddaughter in person. Logically speaking, when a married grandaunt was pregnant, even if her mother couldn't go, her sister-in-law should go to see her. However, old Madame Sun didn't have the idea of asking Sun Yijia's sister-in-law to go, no matter who it was. Sun Yijia took the medicine and slept through the night. She was very careful when she slept at night. However, if she did not sleep well, it would affect her. Luo Jingbo told her not to worry and that he would watch over her. When Luo Jingbo said that he would watch over her, he really meant it. He really did watch over her all night instead of letting the maid do it for him. In fact, a lady like Sun Yijia had been trained to sleep. Her sleeping posture had always been very good, so she didn't have to worry about turning over too much. However, in order to make her feel at ease, Luo Jingbo didn't mind. However, when she saw Luo Jingbo's slightly swollen eyes, she felt sorry for him and told him to go to sleep quickly. She wouldn't let this kind of thing happen again. Jingwan came over early to accompany her. She didn't play the zither much. At this time, after protecting her fingers, she was going to pick them up during this period. She called it prenatal education for her future nephew or niece. Of course, even if she hadn't experienced it, she knew that it was a little early for her to do prenatal education at this time. But it didn't matter. She still needed to practice. She could even play the song Ambush on All Sides. Therefore, even if it was just for practice, the song she chose was simple. Naturally, there wouldn't be any intermittent situation. At most, she would play some parts wrong. At the end of the song, Sun Yijia showed a miserable expression. Sister Wan, on the day of Great Elder Princess's birthday, was it really you who played the zither? Compared with that time, the gap between now and then is simply like the gap between a beginner and a master. Or are you actually teasing me? Jingwan's face darkened. Was it so exaggerated? He felt very good about herself. Sun Yijia seemed to understand Jingwan's meaning and was extremely speechless. Sister Wan was really extraordinarily thick-skinned. When Madame Luo sent someone to lead Madame Sun over, Jingwan was still continuing to torture Sun Yijia. Jingwan got up and saluted. Sun Yijia also wanted to get up, but Madame Sun hurriedly asked her to lie back down. Lie down, lie down. Now is not the time to talk about these superficial formalities. Seeing that Sun Yijia's condition was better than expected, Madame Sun also breathed a sigh of relief. It could be seen that the Luo family really took good care of her. Grandma, why did you come in person? You could have sent someone else. What nonsense are you talking about? I want to see my granddaughter. How can I be disliked? Sun Yijia hurriedly took her hand. I know I was wrong. How can I be disliked? I don't mind. I can't ask for more. Jingwan saw that the grandmother and granddaughter were affectionate and smiled. After all, they were blood relatives. It was good to have a biological grandmother even if they didn't have a biological mother. Then sister-in-law will have a private talk with your grandmother. I'll come over later. Sister-in-law also misses Madame Sun very much. My daughter is presumptuous, so please spend more time with sister-in-law. You don't have to be so polite with me. Although Sister Jia is a married daughter, in my heart she is the same as before she was married. Jingwan squatted and left. Such a good girl. What a pity. Madame Sun sighed again. Grandma, are you regretting every time you see her? Sun Yijia laughed. When Sister Wan first got engaged, I felt sorry for fifth brother. However, later on when they got engaged, I directly told Sister Wan that the engagement might be cancelled. The longer I stay in the Luo family, the more I feel that Duke Ding's mansion is not a place for people to stay. I've already left. How can I bear to see her go in? It's just like it's easy to go from frugal to extravagant, but hard to go from extravagant to frugal. It's not just because of wealth that one's family is extravagant and frugal. If a man makes a mistake in marriage, he can still have another one. But a girl can't. So, I'd rather see fifth brother suffer than Sister Wan fall into a deep mire. How could Madame Sun not understand? But she still reached out and poked Sun Yijia. You're just saying that. You're also a little heartless girl who favors outsiders. It's worth it. Yes, it was worth it. An outsider was worth it, but as her biological mother, she broke her heart. Madame Sun took out the things she carried with her. Keep this well. What's this? Sun Yijia was curious. She touched the brocade bag and felt that it seemed to be a token. Sun Yijia opened it and a little bit of gold appeared. Token? What's this for? Why did grandmother give me this? Madame Sun just looked at her without saying anything. However, when Sun Yijia saw the words in the middle, her pupils shrank. She hurriedly put the token back and looked at Madame Sun in shock. Her lips trembled. Grandmother, this thing, is it really what I think it is? Madame Sun nodded. She opened her mouth slightly and spat out 4 words. Death exemption token. No, grandmother. How can there be such a thing now? If I remember correctly, it was when Emperor Taizu established the Qi Yuan. Sun Yijia suddenly thought of something and looked a little shocked. There were 4 dukes and 9 marquises. Emperor Taizu not only gave them the Iron Scroll, but also gave each of them a death exemption token. He also said that even if they committed treason, they could use this token to avoid the death penalty. The number of people who could be exempted from the death penalty varied from 1 to 9. And for those whose crimes did not warrant death, they could even be exempted from the crime of their entire family. Therefore, for those whose crimes involved the 9 generations, they could choose to save the lives of some of the main criminals and be exiled. Otherwise, those who deserved death would die, and the rest would be exempted from the crime and become commoners. As long as they had this token in hand, they would not be sentenced to the death penalty. Because at that time, those who used the token would definitely be the main culprits who deserved to be killed. The rest were not important. Moreover, each token could be used 3 times. Most importantly, as long as the Qi Yuan was not destroyed, the token would be effective forever. The power of this death exemption token was really too great. When Emperor Taizu gave it away, he was very happy. However, he did not think that it would leave a lot of trouble for his descendants. 4 dukes and 9 marquises, that was 13 tokens. Perhaps they could be exempted from the crime of treason 39 times. Of course, this was only the most ideal situation. In reality, it would definitely not be so. To a certain extent, the death exemption token had actually become a talisman that hastened one's death. In order to eliminate the effect of the death exemption token, as a later emperor, he used a lot of sinister means. For example, he made some important and outstanding descendants of certain families commit the crime of treason. This was actually a relatively gentle means. After all, there were some people who would rather give up an outstanding descendant. The death of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises was a big reason why the death of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises was so fast. It was said that one of the secret reasons why the Ding General Manor could stand until now was that Sun Yijia's grandfather took the initiative to hand over the death exemption token in exchange for something else for the Ding General Manor. The 13 death exemption tokens were taken back one after another. There was only one left, and there was only one chance left. Its influence was almost negligible and its whereabouts were unknown. Therefore, there was no effort to find it. Sun Yijia did not expect that this thing was in the hands of her grandmother and was given to her. Sun Yijia felt a little wrong. Her emotions seemed to be a little too strong. She quickly took 2 deep breaths to calm herself down. Now this thing is not so taboo. You just keep it. It's best if you don't use it. If one day you need it, then you can use it. Sun Yijia held the death-free gold medallion in her hand. This thing was no longer a hot potato. It was a real life-saving talisman. According to her selfish motives, she naturally wanted to keep it. However, she said, "Grandmother, Ding General Manor should need it more." In fact, she more or less knew the current situation of Ding General Manor. Old Madame Sun shook her head. When the Ding General Manor is really destroyed, it can't be saved by a death exemption token. Moreover, this token is not mine. Naturally, it does not belong to the Ding General Manor. Sun Yijia was puzzled. Where did it come from? Would an outsider casually give this kind of thing away? Old Madame Sun just looked at her and remained silent. Sun Yijia's heart suddenly moved. She tentatively asked, "My mother's?" Old Madame Sun nodded. "It is indeed your mother's. Grandmother, did you snatch it from her? This kind of good thing, if you want to give it to someone, it should be given to fifth brother." Sun Yijia said the first half of the sentence with a playful smile, but the second half was extremely calm. Could be seen that her mother really did not affect her. She owes you. Not only the child but also the marriage contract with Jin Qinhuang. Obviously she could use the token to make the emperor take back the order. Although this death exemption token, even if he knew who had it, he would not necessarily take it back. However, who let the parents and ancestors have the obsession to take back the token? If they really wanted to use it to cancel the marriage contract, Lu Qingdi would not disagree. Since that is the case, I won't be polite. Younger sister Wang gave her a big gift. It just so happened that she felt that there was nothing she could do to repay her. Although this thing was far from enough, it could at least express her feelings. She would just give it to her. "Jia, you want to give it away?" Old Madame Sun's golden eyes flashed fiercely. Sun Yijia's expression was very obvious. "And I want to give it to younger sister Wan." Sun Yijia did not deny it. "If you want to give it to her, then give it to her. In any case, it is already yours. You can do whatever you want with it." Old Madame Sun did not care much about this. The Luo family was very affectionate and righteous. If there really was an accident, no matter who had the token, they would not stand by and do nothing. When Li Hongyuan received the news, he was also quite surprised. The death exemption token. In his previous life, it was something that did not appear until his death. Since it was in the hands of Duke Ding's wife, it was pardonable that she did not take it out when Duke Ding's household was destroyed. But why didn't she take it out to save Sun Yijia and her child? It should be known that at that time, Sun Yijia was married to Li Hongyi. Not to mention whether her life in Prince Kang's household was good or not, but the relationship between mother and daughter was not like now. It was almost cut off. Moreover, according to Sun Yilan's temperament, if he knew the existence of this thing, he would definitely force his mother to take it out. Chapter 178. Then in his previous life, where did the gold medallion go? Obviously to Li Hongyuan, it could only be a mystery. However, the emperor was Li Hongyuan. Even if that thing appeared, it would not be of any use. Those who should be killed he would definitely kill. As for the rest, it was completely up to his own wishes. If he wanted to keep it, he would keep it. If he did not want to keep it, it would be useless for anyone to plead for mercy, let alone an inanimate object. Not to mention that he was disrespectful to his ancestors, using a person who had been dead for God knows how many years to pressure him. Just how naive would a person be to do such a thing? However, in his previous life, there really was such a person who used the laws of his ancestors to tell him that he should not do this, and that should not do that. Then what did he do? He did not do anything to the person who advised him. It seemed that if he was not allowed to do something, he would specifically do it until no one dared to say anything rashly. Li Hongyuan, he was a tyrant who did not respect the laws of his ancestors. However, if this gold medallion was in the hands of Wan Wan, it would probably be a different story. If she used it well, it would become another trump card. In the current situation, a gold medallion that was not wanted by those in power by any means, even if there was only one chance left, was definitely a delicious cake that people would scramble for like a flock of ducks. With him behind her back, no one could forcefully take it away. If one wanted the gold medallion, how could they not pay the price of blood? However, it was far from a good time to let people know who had the gold medallion. Of course, at the same time, Li Hongyuan would not give Jingwan and even the Luo family a chance to use it. If he could not even do this, then he could also go and directly kill the emperor, kill his father, and overthrow the imperial power. Then it would be satisfying to do so. Even though they were in the summer palace for the summer and there were enough people in the imperial court to handle most of the government affairs, there were still many things that Lu Qingdi needed to deal with. Every day there were people who rushed to deliver some copied memorials. Although it was less than half of the memorials in the capital, half of them were basically official memorials. There were very few memorials such as paying respects to the emperor. It could not be helped. After all, he did not trust his son very much. Even if his son did not have any power in his hands, the so-called regent of the country was more of a symbolic meaning. He had to grasp the power in his hands to be at ease, and he could not cut off the affairs of the world just because he left the capital for more than 2 months. However, he was still struggling bitterly. He was more tolerant to the officials who followed him. Under the circumstances that there was no important matter, they only needed to go to the roll call next afternoon or show their faces in front of Lu Qingdi. Therefore, during this period most of the officials were very idle. Of course, because the summer palace was close, they had to be on call in case of an emergency. Speaking of the summer palace in Qingda, because of the pleasant climate many flowers and trees grew quite well. In the free time Luo Peishan could not help but start to fiddle with them again. Such a great opportunity, of course he would pull Jingwan together. Although this kind of thing was quite common in the capital, there were fewer opportunities after all. Therefore Jingwan followed Luo Peishan out of the door. Luo Peishan was very familiar with the summer palace, the courtyard built by the summer palace, and the places within a radius of 10 miles with famous flowers and rare plants. In addition to the plants that were specially planted, the wild flowers and trees were actually the most important. About 3 or 4 miles to the west of the summer palace, there was a valley that was not very big. However, there was a waterfall that was not very grand and spectacular, but because of its excellent geographical location, it could reflect light for a long time and looked particularly charming. Such a small waterfall might not even be considered a waterfall, but it made Jingwan stand at the bottom of the stone pool and look up for a long time. There were all kinds of flowers and trees in the surroundings. They were not very luxuriant, but all of them were full of vitality, including the cliff. The few small pine trees were trying their best to stretch out their branches. Because of the impact of the water vapor and the blowing of the wind, they were like jumping elves. Beautiful. Lass, do you like it here? Luo Peishan saw that she was lost in thought and was not in a hurry to ask her to leave. Yes, I like it. I like it very much. Jingwan nodded. If there are no accidents, we will be here for more than 2 months. If you like it, you can come and see it every day. Jingwan was speechless. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, there was no reason to see it every day. Luo Peishan did not seem to see her expression. He stroked his beard and said with deep feelings, when it comes to beautiful scenery, one's state of mind will definitely be different. Different people accompany you, so your perception will definitely be different. Lass, you can have different people accompany you every few days. I believe that even if you see the same scenery every day, it will still be beautiful in a different way. It will definitely not be boring. Jingwan was speechless again. Grandfather, you were a master of literature, but you changed to a master of philosophy in a second. There was really no need for that. Grandfather, since you said so, I can take grandmother to see it. She can change her clothes today and wear the same clothes tomorrow. It will definitely be a novel experience. It was a pity that there were only a few samples of clothes. As the saying went, no matter how many changes there were, it did not deviate from the origin. It was not as varied as it was in her previous life. However, when she thought of her grandparents wearing such strange clothes, the image was not beautiful. She quickly threw away the imagination. Lass, this suggestion is not bad. You should take your grandmother out to see it more often. Jingwan looked at him again. Speaking of which, where was the restraint of scholarly officials? At such an old age, taking a young lady with him was called romantic, but his heart was not old. Taking an old lady with him was called, well, it was called a loving couple loving each other until their hair turned white. Jingwan always felt that she had inadvertently been shown a face of affection by her own grandfather and was stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. In Jingwan's view, this old couple had long lost their passion. However, they had helped each other in difficult times, and a tacit understanding between each other with a glance or a gesture. Perhaps it would not make people blush and their hearts beat faster, but it would definitely make people feel sweet in their hearts. Between her grandfather and grandmother when they were young, there were also times when there was a gap between them. However, when they were old, they were able to get to where they were today. They were not strangers like many people. The old master would walk around the backyard as if he was just going through the motions, then turn around and hug the young lady to prove that he was still strong despite his age. As for his wife, she ate vegetarian and prayed to Buddha. Her heart was as still as water and her six senses were pure. It was very rare. Unfortunately, when she died in her previous life, she did not drink Mengpo's soup. She had a body of bad habits. Someone had interfered in her marriage, so there was no possibility of growing old together. So, sometimes, ignorance is bliss. Well, this kind of ignorance, this kind of bliss, Jingwan did not want it. She was a little sad and a little jealous of her grandparents. Then she threw all these thoughts to the back of her mind. Grandfather, let's go. Why are you walking so fast? Slow down, slow down. You're a young lady, so be more reserved. Luo Peishan hurriedly shouted from behind. Jingwan was in a good mood and full of energy. At this moment, even if she wanted to be reserved, she could not be reserved. It was rare for her to indulge herself. In any case, they were her people, so it did not matter. Therefore, Jingwan jumped faster along the stream formed by the stone pool. In the blink of an eye, her figure was covered by the dense trees. Luo Peishan was even a little dumbfounded. Speaking of which, this jumping like a little monkey, was this really his good grandson who had good self-restraint, a fake temperament and a steady and magnanimous manner? However, when he saw the two servant girls who followed her also jumped a few times on the big and small stones by the stream and quickly disappeared, Luo Peishan came back to his senses. He patted his old heart and hurriedly ordered the two guards to follow. Although these places had been cleared long ago and there would not be any ferocious birds or beasts, there was still no lack of accidents. Grandfather, come quickly. From the sound of that voice, it seemed that she was already farther away. His granddaughter, who had never caused anyone to worry about her, suddenly became an exceptionally headache for Luo Peishan. Could it be that the saying, "Those who do not commit crimes, when they commit crimes, it will be a big deal"? His good grandson had always been gentle and quiet. Now that she was gentle and quiet, she directly turned into a wild monkey? At the very least, she should have informed him in advance so that he could be mentally prepared. Luo Peishan wanted to follow, so naturally he walked in a hurry. Seeing this, his manservant trembled with fear and hurriedly supported him. It was said that Luo Peishan's arms and legs could not jump randomly on stones. Even his manservant would not be able to do so. Trembling slightly, Luo Peishan made a detour from the side, and along the way he had to push aside the branches that blocked the way. When Luo Peishan appeared in Jingwan's line of sight, his hair was somewhat disheveled and he looked quite embarrassed. This was also the first time that Jingwan had seen Luo Peishan like this. Therefore she looked at Luo Peishan without any trace of politeness and smiled. Luo Peishan hurriedly tidied up his appearance and said angrily, "Bad girl, who did this to you?" Jingwan washed the fruit in her hands again and jumped along a few stones. Seeing this, Luo Peishan's old heart pounded fiercely again. He kept urging her to slow down. Jingwan handed over a green-skinned fruit in her hand. "Grandfather, don't worry, I know what I'm doing." As she spoke, she took a bite of another fruit. "It tastes good, grandfather, quickly try it." Then she took 2 more bites. Luo Peishan frowned disapprovingly. "How can you eat fruits in the wild?" "It's okay, I snatched this food from the monkeys' mouths. I saw that they liked to eat it, so it's definitely fine for a person to eat it." Jingwan smiled a little slyly. "Nonsense, you're a well-bred young lady, how can you snatch food from animals? This is simply, ugh." Jingwan stuffed the fruit into his mouth. The fruit wasn't big to begin with, and with this, half of it went into his mouth. Long-winded. She giggled. With his mouth stuffed open, he looked a little stupid. Luo Peishan quickly took it off. "You're getting more and more outrageous, girl." Jingwan ignored him and turned to walk away. As she walked, she turned back to tease him. "I heard from grandmother that grandfather, when you were young, you did a lot of immoral things. You can't be like grandfather, who only allows the state officials to set fires, but not the common people to light lamps." Luo Peishan's old face turned red. Speaking of the immoral things he did, they were all before he married his wife. How did his first wife know about it, and now his granddaughter even knew about it? However, his teeth had just bitten through the skin of the fruit and it seemed to taste good, so he took a bite. Chapter 179. The texture was crisp and sweet. Luo Peishan felt that he liked it very much after chewing a few more mouthfuls. Girl, where did you pick it? Do you have more? It was human nature to eat more if you liked it. Didn't I tell you to grab it from the monkey's mouth? At this age it was rare to have good teeth. The main reason was that grandfather and grandmother were good. Seeing them eat well, the younger generation would be happy. What about the 3-year-old child of a grandfather? It looks fresh. The skin is not broken at all. There is no mark of being wiped. Such a capable monkey is so stupid. How could a girl like you snatch it without any effort? Girl, don't belittle monkeys like this. Be careful that monkeys will come to you in groups. Luo Peishon laughed. The little girl was too tender to tease him. Where are your 2 maids? There were maids guarding the courtyard. There was no reason for her to do it herself. Master, the servants are here. Bai Xiao and Sister He came around from behind the bushes. Sister He was holding 2 branches with the fruit in her hand, and Bai Xiao was holding a bag with a large leaf in her hand. It could be seen that the sisters had a rich harvest in this short period of time. Because they already knew what kind of place they were heading to before they left, Jingwan and her 2 servants were dressed simply and tried their best to be as neat as possible. Even Jingwan only wore a string of Buddhist prayer beads on her wrist. As for other accessories, whether it was on her head, body, or even earrings, she didn't have a single one. The 2 sisters climbed the tree to pick fruits and stood there looking very pretty. Alright, the one who was useless was only this old fellow. Perhaps the weak little servant beside him was also included. Even if that was the case, a group of strong, thick-skinned and coarse-grown men are here. How could they let a delicate little girl do such a thing? The 2 sisters were a little speechless. Could they say that they volunteered themselves? Moreover, as maids they were so immature. Would they be thought that they couldn't serve the girl well and be driven away? He couldn't help but feel angry and nervous. Jingwan didn't care. She smiled and said, Grandfather Bai Xiao and Sister He were born in a family of hunters. They are used to living in the mountains since they were young. If it weren't for the accident, they might still be the same as before. Climbing trees to fish for eggs, picking fruits, breaking firewood, setting traps all over the mountains and wilderness, drawing bows and arrows to hunt prey, catching fish and crabs in the water. These were all child's play, and they were exceptionally carefree and happy. Luo Peishon understood. If it was due to the slow growth of one's temperament would gradually settle down. Occasionally, one would feel nostalgic when thinking about that kind of life in the past, and would basically not have similar thoughts. However, if one was not a child and cut off one's original life due to external reasons, and suddenly changed from one environment to another, perhaps one would develop an obsession with the past. Normally, one might be calm and collected, but once there was an opportunity, it was inevitable that one would become restless and unbearable. The little girl Luo Peishon had never had any evil thoughts, so she waved her hand. There are no outsiders today, just play as you wish. They were all from the Luo family. If they played wildly, they wouldn't be afraid of ruining their image. As for the people sent by Jin Qinhuang, since they entered the Luo family's gate, then naturally they would be surnamed Luo. It didn't matter if they'd informed the original master. If you dislike my good grandson for being boorish, then don't marry him if you have the ability. Therefore, Luo Daren's resentment towards a certain person was still very deep. Sister He showed a pleasantly surprised expression. Even Bai Xiao's eyes couldn't help but brighten. Playing is playing, take it easy. Don't hurt yourself. Looking at those hands, it was clear that she had been pampered for a long time. Seeing the people around her happy, her own mood couldn't help but improve. Come, wash the fruits. Everyone have a taste. Bai Xiao went to pick some large leaves and washed them together with the fruits. This was natural spring water, so there was no need to worry about it being dirty. Then everyone who came out had a share. The others were fine, but Luo Peishon, that manservant, was somewhat flattered. Grandfather, did you mistreat him on a daily basis? Jingwan ate while smiling impolitely. Even if these were all family, but in any case they were still a group of men. Can't you be a little bit more reserved? Sweeping a glance, they were tactful. Each and every one of them was immersed in eating their own things. From beginning to end, their eyes didn't wander around, let alone stare unscrupulously. Not to mention the original guards, their character was not bad. As the people sent by an E, they knew how to be powerful. After a round of ruthless brainwashing, they knew the way of survival very well. Luo Peishon fiercely glared at the manservant beside him. Useless thing, losing face for him. A grown man, how could he follow him and see some of the world? In the end, he wasn't as generous as a girl who was smaller than him. Really, he had been raised in vain. The manservant was baffled by Luo Peishan's glare. However, because of Jingwan's words, he was somewhat embarrassed. Except for this little episode, the atmosphere was warm and harmonious. After eating, they continued to follow the direction of the stream. With Luo Peishan's permission, although Jingwan couldn't behave atrociously everywhere like Bai Xiao and Hei Mei, and after all she was only exercising all year round and was still lacking in some skills, this didn't prevent her from having fun. From this side of the valley she suddenly saw something on the opposite cliff and jumped over. In short, from the left cliff to the right cliff and then to the left cliff, there was a pile of messy things such as fungi, fruits and even herbs. The result was that she seemed to have accidentally forgotten the reason why she came here. Because so far she had stayed in the valley for more than 2 hours and hadn't dug up a single flower seedling. Or it could be said that Jingwan didn't pay attention to it at all. Although the purpose of today's trip was most likely to be ruined, Luo Peishan wasn't angry at all. Compared to those things, he really preferred to hear his good granddaughter's wanton laughter and see her in high spirits. However, the culprit who drove the animals in the valley was still laughing complacently. Luo Peishan even wanted to cover his face. He couldn't bear to look at his good granddaughter. However, when he thought of the things he did at her age, Lord Luo coughed lightly and calmed down. That was nothing compared to what his granddaughter was doing. It was not worth mentioning at all. Also, because Jingwan and the others explored a wider range, they found some things that others hadn't discovered before. In fact, there were quite a lot of people in this place, including Emperor Luqing. At the bottom of the valley, on one side of the cliff, there was a paved bluestone road. It was rare to see a situation where only a family came out. Perhaps some ministers or girls came out together. Because of their status, they naturally wouldn't do anything out of line. However, there were quite a lot of people walking along the bluestone road. It seemed lively, but in fact the atmosphere was similar to a group of people strolling in a garden. It was very boring. Probably because he had long been tired of this way, Luo Peishan basically walked along the stream. Large and small stones were scattered and intertwined with each other. This road was definitely not easy to walk on. However, even if he walked at a snail's speed, Luo Peishan was still in high spirits. Jingwan and the others kept crossing, so he didn't worry at all that he couldn't keep up with them. At some point Jingwan suddenly stopped. Bai Xiao, sister, hey, listen. Is there a cat's meow? A cat's meow? The two sisters stopped and listened carefully. Both of them were martial artists and had once traversed the wilderness, so they were very sensitive to the movements of the wind and grass in the wilderness. They didn't notice it earlier. After all, even if they were just playing around, they didn't forget their job. Most of their attention was on Jingwan, so when they paid attention they immediately found their target. It was under 2 intertwined stones. The sound was weak and there were bloodstains outside. It was probably injured. Sister Hei stretched out her head to take a look. Miss, it's a mountain fox. Its leg is injured. Mountain fox? Wasn't that a leopard cat? Quickly take it out. The two sisters had seen mountain civet before. Although it was similar in size to a house cat, it was only similar. It was extremely ferocious and wild. Even if it was just a cub, its claws were very sharp. Ordinary ropes couldn't tie it at all. It could bite off the ropes in minutes. As far as Jingwan knew, leopard cats could even bite off iron chains. Therefore she told Sister Hei to be careful and not hurt herself. Sister Hei was obviously good at dealing with mountain foxes. She easily caught the little thing. Is it still a cub? It looked so small that Sister Hei could easily hold it with 2 hands. It was mainly silver gray. Its chest, abdomen and the inside of the limbs were white. The spots were black. It looked furry and cute. However, although it was cute, it was very restless. Its claws were waving and it wanted to turn its head to bite. Unfortunately, it was useless. Its eyes were also exceptionally alert. It's indeed a cub. Is at most 2 months old. However, if it continues to struggle, the wound on its leg will burst open. Bai Xiao said. What should we do? Is there no way to quiet it down? Unexpectedly encountering such a little thing and seeing it suffer, she couldn't bear it. Moreover, Jingwan actually had a slight fur fetish. Miss, Sister Blackie and I have killed a lot of prey in the past, including mountain raccoons. Our father said that these little things are very intelligent. Those who have been hunters usually can't keep them alive. They even reject us when we get close. Jingwan understood. Although she didn't know the origin of this saying, Jingwan still tried to reach out and touch it. It was very amazing that it really settled down a lot. Moreover, its claws tried to reach out to Jingwan. Its small eyes also stared straight at her. Jingwan felt her little heart tremble slightly. She reached out to hold it. Sister He didn't refuse, but still controlled its claws to prevent it from suddenly hurting Jingwan. Jingwan was careful not to touch its injured leg. She held it with one hand and pinched its ear with the other. Then she moved her hand along its head and gently stroked its body. She even comforted it softly. It was really useful. Bai Xiao, go get some medicine and bandage its leg. Because they were out in the wild, the corresponding things were naturally well prepared. Jingwan kept comforting it. Perhaps it felt her kindness. The vigilance in its eyes faded little by little, and even its sharp claws were retracted. Jingwan was very surprised and asked Sister He to let go. Then, except for the injured leg, the other 3 legs were retracted into Jingwan's arms. It looked quiet and harmless. This mountain fox likes you very much. Jingwan smiled and her eyes curved. It was obvious that the little thing's dependence made Jingwan very happy. So happy. The sudden voice made Jingwan jump in surprise. But because of that familiar voice, Jingwan immediately turned her head. On the Bluestone Road less than 2 zhang away, there was a man dressed simply but still unbelievably handsome. His eyes were as bright as stars as he focused on Jingwan. Wang, why are you also here? Li Hongyuan gently hooked his lips. Because you are here. Even though she knew what kind of person he was, Jingwan's heartbeat still couldn't stop speeding up, and her face was somewhat hot. His sweet talk skills were really maxed out. When he opened his mouth it was so unbearable. However, this bastard, he shouldn't be so flirtatious. Would it kill him to speak properly? He wouldn't die if he spoke properly because Jin Qinhuang was just telling the truth. He was sincere. Because Jingwan was here he came. Li Hongyuan took a few steps forward, crouched down at the edge of the Bluestone Road, and extended his hand to her. Jingwan hesitated for a moment before walking forward. The road was at the position of her chest. Wang, how about you wait a moment? Li Hongyuan snatched the mountain fox from Jingwan's arms. That place was close to the position of Jingwan's chest. Speaking of which, he still had that honor, but a beast took the lead. Li Hongyuan grabbed it by the scruff of its neck and raised it in front of his eyes, looking at it with slightly narrowed eyes. The little thing first kicked around and this time all the fur on its body stood up. Its tail also stiffly stuck up and it kept making threatening sounds. But in Jingwan's ears, it sounded somewhat pitiful. Wang, it's injured you. Li Hongyuan raised his hand and threw it behind him. Jingwan was startled. Just when she thought that it would meet with misfortune, that small body was firmly caught by the guard behind. Jingwan obviously breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that Jingwan cared so much about the beast, Li Hongyuan's heart was naturally unhappy. He actually wanted to directly slaughter that beast. Speaking of which, it was so ugly there was no value in skinning it. But who let his wifey like it? Come up. This time Jingwan didn't refuse. She reached out and put it in his palm. It was still the same touch. It was reasonable to say that it was difficult for a lady from a respectable family to lift her foot and use it as leverage to climb up. It looked very crude, okay? Speaking of which, to get on a carriage there were 2 ladders. But as her fiancé he didn't care, so what else could other people say? So even if Luo Peishan happened to see it, he only chose to watch silently. No matter what this living king of hell did, you only need to watch and don't need to talk. He didn't do anything to his granddaughter, so Jingwan just stood beside Li Hongyuan and went to look at the little fellow. Li Hongyuan's eyes were covered with hostility. Originally he wanted to reach out his claws to Jingwan, but when he met her eyes he suddenly shrank back. Jingwan was stunned. She was being despised just by turning around. Chapter 180. Jingwan didn't give up and wanted to continue reaching out to hug it, but this time, the little thing directly burrowed into the guard's arms, as if Jingwan was a great demon king and the person hugging it was its salvation. It didn't even care about its injured leg. Seeing that its injured leg had obviously burst open again, Jingwan hurriedly withdrew her hand and even took 2 steps back. Then the little thing that was looking at her with its little eyes stopped struggling. Those pitiful little eyes in Jingwan's eyes seemed to be extremely happy. Jingwan was heartbroken. Was she so unwelcomed? However, it was clearly fine before, so it definitely wasn't her fault. Thus, those slightly accusing eyes fell on the guard. It's all your fault. At this time, the gaze directed at the little thing fell on an E. An E complained incessantly in his heart and his body stiffened. Miss Luo, great aunt, the culprit is behind you. Don't look at me. If you continue to look, Master will definitely chop me up. An E wished he could turn around and run away, but he didn't dare. He could only lower his eyebrows and restrain his eyes, standing motionlessly. Fortunately, Jingwan only looked for a while before withdrawing her gaze. She looked at the little thing with a bit of reluctance but didn't persist. She turned back and let Bai Xiao treat the little thing's wound. Li Hongyuan reached out and touched Jingwan's face. It's that little bastard who doesn't know what's good for him. Jingwan avoided his hand and secretly rolled her eyes at him. There were so many people. Even if you were a prince, you should follow the rules. Her grandfather was still watching from the side. Moreover, once this kind of matter was exposed, the one whose reputation would always be damaged would only be the woman. Even if this matter was not known to outsiders, she felt that this matter shouldn't be known to outsiders. Li Hongyuan didn't push his luck and withdrew his hand. If you like it, I'll get someone to get it for you from other places. Kittens and puppies, any breed is fine. If you want something else, it's also not a problem. I remember that there's a kind of sweet fox in the northern snowy mountains. Its whole body is snow white and has a strange fragrance. If you want to raise a fierce one, tiger or leopard, Your Highness. Jingwan opened her mouth to interrupt him. It's just fate that allowed me to meet this little fellow. Once it recovers, I will naturally release it back into the wild. I will only treat its wounds and will not bring it away. She was not a beast tamer, she could not afford to raise a tiger or a leopard. She was not a beast tamer, she could not afford to play with these big pets. Li Hongyuan understood what Jingwan meant. Even if she liked someone, she didn't want to forcefully change someone's fate, even if it was just an animal. This kind of heart was actually somewhat incompatible with the majority of the people at present. Not to mention the high officials and nobles, even the common people knew that if you had power and influence, you were a cut above others. It was a matter of course that you could easily control someone's fate. In his previous life, Li Hongyuan also knew that she wouldn't easily kill people. It was just that at that time he only felt that she was exceptionally compassionate. However, after suspecting Jingwan's origin, he became more and more curious about her initial life. However, this wasn't a matter of urgency. One day he would let Jingwan take the initiative to tell him. As for those little animals, since Wan liked them, naturally he would satisfy her. When the time came, he would send them to her hands. How could she be so heartless as to throw them away? However, before sending them to her, she must train them well and raise them in front of her. It didn't matter if they were teased by her, but if they dared to pounce on her, they would have to suffer a little. As a result, Jingwan ended up raising a bunch of pets in the future. As a result, the pets were only allowed to touch and hug them. She was the only one that was not allowed to hug them. Jingwan's mood was extremely depressed. It must be said that those little animals clearly liked her very much. When they saw her, they would rub against her feet. In the end, when she stretched out her hand, the speed at which they ran away was as if Jingwan wanted their lives. Of course, this was a story for the future. Let's not talk about it for now. As long as you're happy, said Li Hongyuan. Jingwan raised her head and looked at him quietly. He spoke so dotingly and was so thoughtful and considerate. Jingwan suddenly wanted to know where his bottom line was. Even if he treated her as a substitute, this word might not be right. He should just be transferring his affection. Under the circumstances of not giving her his true feelings, why not enjoy it? Because she always believed that feelings were mutual. Then, in addition to love, she could treat him as a close family. She could treat him as well as he treated her well. Because of the barrier between men and women, she couldn't do too much to him now, otherwise it would attract gossip. However, it didn't prevent her from keeping it in her heart until after their wedding. Well, because she didn't give him her love, then she wouldn't have the desire to monopolize him. Then she wouldn't care about how many women he had. According to what he said just now, as long as he was happy it was fine. She wouldn't be sad. Jingwan's eyes brightened. She felt that this idea of hers was really too perfect. She didn't need to worry about the purpose of his every time he did something. No matter what he did, what he gave, it would be fine until the day he stopped. Wang, do you want to come together? I think this place is quite fun. Saying that, she didn't wait for Li Hongyuan to respond and jumped down from the place she came up from. As she walked, she turned her head and said, Bai Xiao, take care of the little guy's injuries. Whether you take him back to recuperate or release him, you decide. Following that, she smiled and waved at Li Hongyuan. At the age of 22 or 23 in her previous life, many people were still university students. It was the time when they liked to play. Although it could be said that the people nowadays were generally precocious, including Jin Wang, who sometimes did things. It seemed a bit willful, even a bit mischievous, but it couldn't be denied that he was a mature man. It didn't matter if he played once in a while. Li Hongyuan naturally felt that Jingwan's attitude towards him was obviously a lot closer. It was no longer that kind of alienation, restraint, and etiquette. If it wasn't that the change was a bit too fast, he would have suspected that he had waited until the clouds parted to see the moon. Looking at the way Jingwan looked at him, it wasn't that he hadn't seen a woman infatuated with him, but it had nothing to do with Wan's eyes. Right now he still lacked a tacit understanding with Wan. He didn't know what she was thinking. However, being willing to be close to him could be considered a big improvement. Therefore, without hesitation, he directly followed. Except for the other guards all followed. However, because Bai Xiao happened to be close, a burst of girl's fragrance entered his nostrils. It made the big man, who didn't dare to casually find a woman because of his special status, feel a bit strange in his body. He actually wanted to directly give this mountain fox to the other party and quickly leave. However, Bai Xiao said, hold tight. So could only continue to stiffen his body. And those brothers who left not only didn't have the code of brotherhood, they also smiled ambiguously at him. These people were destined to not be able to continue to serve their master. They shouldn't expect to marry and have children. Even if they went to the brothel to find a woman, they couldn't do it. If they wanted to marry and have children, there was only one situation. When they were no longer suitable to be a guard. Either they were injured, or as they grew older they no longer had the ability to do it. Basically, it was the former. If they really encountered that kind of situation, 9 out of 10 of them basically wouldn't be willing to marry a wife. Because their bodies were seriously ill, it meant that their lives wouldn't be long. Thus, why would they want to harm a good girl? However, if the princess consort wanted to find a husband for her personal maidservant, how could the master not fulfill her wish if she fancied him? It wasn't that they used this kind of method to get rid of their current position. In fact, it was more because this group of old bachelors, who were like their master and hadn't had sex before, suddenly had the opportunity to come in contact with a beautiful girl. The person involved might be shy, but the other brothers couldn't help but feel wretched in their hearts. It must be said that everyone around Li Hongyuan was like this. Naturally it wasn't. There were some special tasks that naturally required special methods. Thus, there were all kinds of special talents. For example, it wasn't normal for there to be experts in the brothel. Because Yi's body was stiff, he strangled the little fellow. That cry was a bit miserable. Bai Xiao frowned and reached out to pat Yi. Why are you holding him so tightly? Loosen up a bit. Then Yi let go and was scratched by the little fellow. Not to mention that his clothes were directly torn, he also felt a stabbing pain. Clearly, his arm also suffered a calamity. Unsurprisingly, Bai Xiao raised her head and glanced at him. It was clearly a very dull glance, but Yi always felt that her left eye had trash written on it and her right eye had thing written on it. He really felt that he had lost a lot of face. The people who had already walked far away didn't care about the undercurrent between the two people. Under Jingwan's leadership, they continued their exploration. Of course, Jingwan didn't forget to turn around and remind her grandfather to be careful. Li Hongyuan also finally gave Luo Daren a look. His eyes were like an ancient well without ripples. On the contrary, Luo Daren was indeed furious. Especially since he once said that he wouldn't let his good granddaughter lose her chastity. At most he would just kiss and hug. Mother, wasn't kissing and hugging enough? How many people didn't even see each other before they got married? Therefore, few people looked forward to marrying their daughters and granddaughters into the imperial family. However, Luo Daren wasn't happy at all. The most important point was that this kind of son-in-law and grandson-in-law couldn't be beaten up. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan running around like a child, but he didn't say a word. He followed behind her very easily. When she wanted to pick something and was unable to do it, he would go forward and help her. As a result, Li Hongyuan completely took over Bai Xiao and little sister Hei's work. Whatever Jingwan said was what it was. Wang Ye, look. Isn't that a tea tree up there? Jingwan pulled his arm and said. Li Hongyuan looked down. It was indeed a wild tea tree. It wasn't very big, but it looked verdant and lush. Go get a basket. It was fine before, but this time Jingwan was scared by his tone. It was halfway up the mountain and the cliff was steep. Wang Ye, it's too dangerous. This subject's daughter was also a little surprised when she suddenly saw it. I didn't say I wanted to pick it. Aren't there vines on the side? It's easy to go up. It's fine. It's better not. It's really too dangerous. Jingwan shook her head disapprovingly. Li Hongyuan looked at her. Trust me. Jingwan opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. She had a feeling that he wasn't referring to the current situation. The basket was quickly brought over. Master, why don't you let this subordinate go down? As a bodyguard, of course, he didn't want to see him in danger. Li Hongyuan turned around and glanced at him indifferently. Say this again when you know how to pick tea. Chapter 181. Just as Li Hongyuan himself said, because of the vines, it wasn't difficult to climb up. Not only was it not difficult, he also maintained a natural and unrestrained grace. Purely in front of his wife, he was a male peacock showing off his gorgeous feathers at all times. Of course, because it was done too naturally, no one thought about it. They only felt that this person was born to be like this. That tea tree was on a protruding rock and there should be a lot of soil on it. As long as one went up and was careful, there shouldn't be any hidden danger. However, even so, it still made people tremble with fear. There was no other way. The other party's identity was too honorable and couldn't tolerate the slightest bit of mishap. Wang Ye, be careful. Jingwan couldn't help but remind him from below. Li Hongyuan smiled. Don't worry. Then he waved his hand and the bodyguard threw the basket up. Li Hongyuan acted very quickly. For the time being, they still couldn't see the quality of the tea leaves. But based on his technique, it really looked like something. Jingwan couldn't help but think, was this really Wang Ye? And his bodyguard more or less had the same thought. Luo Peishan, who rushed over later, was also a little confused. Who could tell him what was going on? I just saw that there was a wild tea tree above, so... Jingwan explained rather helplessly. So, a single word from my dear grandson and you, Prince, are willing to risk your life to fulfill it? Should he blame him for not cherishing himself and causing trouble for others, or should he be gratified that he cared so much about his good grandson? Looking at the prince, who was quietly looking up to pick the tea, even if Jin Qinhuang had a notorious record, but to sincerely do this, there should be very few women who wouldn't be moved. Alas, a grown girl can't be kept at home. Wang Ye, be careful. Jingwan suddenly took 2 steps forward and exclaimed. His bodyguard also uniformly moved forward, as if preparing to be a cushion. Luo Peishan subconsciously raised his head. Someone seemed to have slipped and his body swayed. If his endurance was slightly weaker, there really was a danger of his heart exploding. Your Highness, why don't you come down first? Jingwan tried to persuade him. Good girl. Come down when you're done. It's not much, just a little while. I didn't pay attention just now. I'll be careful. Li Hongyuan said to Jingwan warmly while his hands didn't stop moving. His tone and attitude were simply outrageous. Jingwan decided that when he came down she must hold him firmly. She did not believe that he would do something that would stimulate people's hearts. It was tiring to meet such a willful and reckless person. Fine, since she was the cause, she chose to shut up. Jin Qinhuang refused to come down, so he could only wait for him to finish picking, and then use the vines to put down the basket. The one who knew more about tea here was Sir Luo, because he had been an official in the area where tea was produced. He knew the whole process of making tea very well, and he could be considered an expert. Using his hands to pick up a few tender tea tips, he was already prepared to see a pile of too horrible to look at tea tips. But the truth was the complete opposite. Not only were the tea tips similar to each other, they were just right, and the technique was also completely correct. Seeing that Jin Qinhuang had already come down, Luo Peishan's eyes were a bit subtle. The truth was there was nothing that a certain person couldn't do. He not only knew how to do it, he also did it very well. Therefore, when it came to pleasing the Luo family's third young lady, everyone else had to step aside. Seeing that Jin Qinhuang had safely landed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. "Your Highness, quickly go wash your hands," Jingwan said. Li Hongyuan naturally nodded his head in response. Then Luo Peishan came back to his senses. Looking at his grandson again, his eyes were a bit subtle. How difficult it was to deal with Jin Qinhuang, these people were very clear. Lu Qingdi as his father had a headache, but in front of his grandson he was so obedient and well-behaved. Then one day would his grandson be able to tie up this living king of hell? Getting rid of the #1 scourge for Qi Yuan, it was truly a cause for celebration. No, Luo Daren hurriedly shook off the thoughts in his mind. Luo Peishan picked up a tea tip and put it in his mouth, chewing it. He could almost conclude that the final product of this wild tea would be comparable to the best tea. Then he looked up at the tea tree, somewhat eager to move. If this tea was cultivated, would there be a new kind of tea? But when he thought about how some things would not be the same if they were changed, he dispelled this idea. After that, Jingwan, as she thought before, pulled Li Hongyuan and didn't let him do anything that specifically challenged people's hearts. But fortunately after that, at most it would be climbing the tree. This point Jingwan felt that even she could do it. With Li Hongyuan's guards, even if Bai Xiao and He Mei wanted to do something, it would be snatched away before they could do it. The two sisters couldn't play properly and expressed their unhappiness. Jingwan, on the other hand, felt like she was watching a play. "Wang Ye, these guards of yours don't seem to be right all. Their vigor was a bit excessive. Small things like sesame seeds they would scramble to do it. There was even a tendency to fight." Li Hongyuan, on the other hand, was very leisurely. A grown man can't be kept at home. If he stays, he stays, he stays, and if he stays, he will become an enemy. Jingwan stumbled and almost fell. She looked strangely at Li Hongyuan. A certain person even nodded as if he was serious. Jingwan really wanted to say, "Wang Ye, you're nodding carelessly, do you really understand what I mean?" However, when she looked at the guards who were almost petrified because of Li Hongyuan's words, she suddenly felt that these guards of Prince Jin were really miserable. Then she inexplicably followed Li Hongyuan's words and looked at Bai Xiao and He Mei. She had 2 beautiful maids and there were a few others who didn't come with her. If there were no accidents, she would get married after her coming-of-age ceremony next year. It was not that the Luo family didn't want to keep her, but a certain prince had already become a young man. Before that, only Qingzhu would get married. Moreover, if he didn't like anyone, Qingzhu would also be part of the dowry. In fact, it was a good choice for the mistress's dowry made to marry her husband's capable men. For the mistress, it was also one of the ways to gain a firm foothold. However, as the prince's guards, most of them were of good birth. Would they marry a maid who was born a slave? Qi Yuan also clearly stated that people of good birth and low birth were not allowed to marry. Even if their slave status was removed before they got married, they would still be looked down upon most of the time. "Isn't it a good match for you to marry your personal maid to one of my subordinates?" Wang Ye is joking. Li Hongyuan smiled noncommittally. This group of people under him, if he really let them marry the people around Wanwan, he was afraid that they would fight over it. Which one of them didn't know that Jingwan treated the people around her well? When Wanwan entered Jin Qinhuang Fu, she was the one who held the absolute power. Not to mention the head maidservants who served close to her. Even the second and third ranked maidservants would fight to marry her. Of course, those people wouldn't be those close to him fighting over her. In such a big Jin Qinhuang Fu there were hundreds of servants. There are too many monks and too little gruel. Be smart, don't say that I, as your master, didn't give you a chance. The group of guards looked at each other in dismay. Then what their master meant was right? Thus after that, Bai Xiao and He Mei's sides were not quiet anymore. Jingwan's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Were these really the group of guards with a poker face? They were clearly amusing people who were trying to curry favor, okay? Jingwan actually wanted to say, "Why didn't you learn a few moves in front of your master?" "Wang Ye, the maids by my side are also young and fair ladies. Don't worry, they know what they are doing and won't do anything overboard. Now they are all on the same side, so they won't damage their reputation and won't implicate you." Luo Daren suddenly snorted, like master, like subordinate. They are of the same origin. Li Hongyuan was very thick-skinned. but Wang's subordinates act like outsiders, so Wang doesn't need to mingle. Speaking of which, Lord Luo was originally quite happy, but ever since a certain someone appeared, he felt that it was incomparably painful to the eyes. Even if that certain someone did not do anything to his good grandson at his age, he still felt embarrassed, and this was with him. Then without the Luo family's elders, how much would his good grandson be bullied? Jingwan was embarrassed. She glared at Li Hongyuan, opened her mouth and sent him 2 words with her lips. Shut up. Plus come here. Grandfather can't walk anymore. Help grandfather. Knowing that it was an excuse, Li Hongyuan glanced at the servant who was in charge of serving him. However, Jingwan quickly tugged at him. Her meaning was obvious. Shut up, shut up. Then she quickly walked to Luo Daren's side and held his arm. Luo Daren glanced at Li Hongyuan with some pride. His expression was so good that Jingwan saw it and couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. He was like a child who had won a candy fight. It was not ordinary childish. Luo Daren's image. Even so, there was still someone causing trouble. Say, I can keep it for a while, but I can't keep it for a lifetime. I can keep it before marriage, but can I keep it after marriage? His casual words made Luo Daren so angry that he almost vomited blood. He almost couldn't control his temper and spat. However, if Luo Daren was angered, even if he was a prince, he would not let it go so easily. Then Luo Daren's sage's teachings was activated again. After speaking for a long time, he saw that Li Hongyuan seemed to be speechless like the others. He stroked his beard proudly. Jingwan didn't know what words to use to describe it. However, according to her little understanding of a certain someone, it was impossible for him to be finished like this. Even if he was temporarily defeated, he would probably find another way to make up for it. However, it was obvious that everyone had underestimated Li Hongyuan. Is Luo Daren done? Then it's this prince's turn to speak. Thus, in the same way as Luo Daren, he cited the classics, the words of the ancient sages, and added his own fallacies. It was a long and eloquent speech without any repetition. Whatever Luo Peishan reprimanded him just now, he returned it 3 times over. Those who didn't know would think that he was a famous scholar, or the very young, handsome and confident kind. You. Luo Daren pointed at him with a trembling finger. This bastard hid it too well. It was fine if he was scheming, but his knowledge was also so good. How could he let others live? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.